While arranging his uniform, the security guard unexpectedly discovered a shoe under the curtain. Alert, he immediately stepped forward to check the situation. The assassin calmly put on his shoe, concealed his blade, and walked toward his final target. He then entered the room where the target was. Upon seeing Joe, the target knew he couldn't escape. He tried to bribe Joe with more money. His female companion immediately fled the scene, only to be spotted by the target's bodyguard. After failing to contact the other two guards, the bodyguard knew something was wrong. Sure enough, he found his dead employer in the private room. The man's name was Joe. During a physical examination, he was diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor. Faced with this sudden news, Joe's only concern was his beloved girlfriend. However, she didn't know Joe's true identity. If Joe directly gave her his hard-earned wealth, his kind-hearted girlfriend would surely refuse this heavy burden of love. Then Joe had an idea. He went directly to his boss and placed a hit order, with himself as the target. As it turned out, Joe had already purchased a high-value insurance policy and changed the beneficiary to his girlfriend. Since suicide wasn't covered by the policy, he planned to hire assassins to end his life, thereby triggering the payout clause. Despite his willingness to pay any price, his boss's emotional attachment to him went beyond monetary value. The boss firmly refused Joe's request. After leaving, Joe went to Mace's dance rehearsal room. Mace was training hard at the time. Joe came to return her phone. Seeing Joe, Mace was surprised. She had wanted to treat him to a meal to thank him for his previous help, but he declined. Before Joe left, Mace handed him a photo with her contact information. At that moment, Joe learned that the girl's name was Mace. But just after leaving, Joe threw the photo with her contact information into a trash can. After walking a few steps, Joe seemed to have second thoughts and retrieved the photo from the trash. Then he returned home in a daze, waiting for death to come. However, before that, Joe told Mace about his terminal illness. Just then, his phone suddenly began receiving frantic messages from the doctor. Joe felt a chill down his spine. As midnight approached, the assassins had arrived at his building. Joe wouldn't just sit and wait for death. He set up traps and waited quietly for the assassins' arrival. But the assassins weren't ordinary opponents. Sensing danger, one assassin blew out a smoke cloud, revealing all the traps in the room. Joe could only say it was all a misunderstanding. He wanted to cancel the hit, but they wouldn't back down. So Joe naturally wouldn't go easy on them. After dealing with the assassins, Joe called the woman. He wanted to cancel the hit order and was willing to pay a penalty fee. But the woman reminded Joe that he might have forgotten. Her father had died at Joe's hands. If Joe hadn't actively sought her out, she would have forgotten about it all. Seeing no room for negotiation, Joe crushed his phone. Meanwhile, the assassins had already arrived. Worried that Mace might face retaliation, Joe transferred her a large sum of money, telling her to leave immediately. He would return to her after resolving everything himself. Just then, Joe's phone rang. The caller ID showed it was Mace, but the voice belonged to the assassin Loff. Indeed, Loff had already arrived. Loff's demand was simple. He only cared about money. Either he would use Mace as leverage to kill Joe and take $4 million, or Joe could pay $4 million himself, and Loff would let Mace leave. Before they could reach a deal, Bella's subordinate Mac arrived with his mercenary squad. Joe had to prepare immediately. During their escape, Joe finally revealed his identity as an assassin and the misdiagnosis. Mace finally forgave him. But the next second, Mace suddenly fainted without warning. Joe pulled over to the side of the road. After checking, he discovered her shoulder had been grazed by a grenade. Joe remembered there was a church nearby, so he carried Mace to seek the priest's help. Soon, Mace, whose injury wasn't serious, regained consciousness. Seeing the priest and church readily available, and with the atmosphere just right, Joe acted on impulse and proposed. At the story's end, Joe held a grand wedding ceremony for Mace, and he retired from his old life to begin a new chapter.